Stories of an Aircraft Builder. The move to the new house in Weschenbeuren took months. The first things to move in were all the airplanes, even before the house was signed over to us. In the meantime, it was all back and forth between Schorndorf, Loch, our home, and Weschenbeuren. We brought the Jeep with us from Friedrichshafen. There are olive green Jeeps everywhere, so I had the idea to do some research and represent the car as a vehicle captured by the Wehrmacht. For the rest of the time Jerry Moss was still visiting this year, we made this our little project. We all had a lot of fun with it. In Schorndorf, there were still the airplanes built by me, the triplanes, Marvin and Jose's, as well as the fourth, which we had also built. Everything was just a shell, the bare fuselages. The fuselages were only there as a scaffolding welded steel tube frames. Not very bulky, but they still had to go to Weschenbeuren. José Morales must have had some upheavals in his life and gave up on the triplane project. He said we should take over the one he had already built, and if we wanted to continue building it, he would get in touch when it had settled down. He didn't get back to me. After I moved out of the hall in Schorndorf, piece by piece with my things, Shirley rented part of the space in the hall and started building the wings of José's triplane. She also finished them and is still looking for someone who wants them, as far as I know. After the house purchase was finalized, I started the renovation there. A few parts for which I didn't yet have a means of transportation initially remained in the hall in Schorndorf. These included an Opel Kadett built in 1965, which I was working on as a restoration project. So the year 2012 passed and 2013 arrived. The renovation of the house was complete enough to live in, and the family began to settle in. Everything was rearranged and life was realigned. Peace and quiet settled in. Then there was a banging on the door, early in the morning at 6:30. 10 men, a criminal investigator, a public prosecutor, waved a search warrant, and people began to turn the newly furnished house upside down, just like in the movies. I already outlined this briefly in episode 42. In the Wolf case, said the criminal investigator. Of course, I had to assume that the offended banker was up to something again. Otherwise, why would the name Wolf be mentioned? Everything was ransacked, and all the documents and files from the freshly prepared accounts for the New Zealanders were packed into boxes, confiscated, and taken away. It was only in the course of the following month that I gradually found out that the criminal investigator had only used the name Wolf by mistake in this context. I can't say exactly what role he actually played, whether it was he who had reported me to the public prosecutor's office for suspect fraud, or whether his name had just slipped in there somehow. Something must have led to his name being involved. As far as I could tell, he was the one who made a fuss. I was only able to find out later that it was mainly the New Zealanders who had called in the public prosecutor, who then of course immediately raced off, because they were always mentioned in the course of the case and in several summonses and hearings. There was only ever talk of invoicing New Zealand. The whole thing went on throughout 2013 and into 2014. They really blew my mind and caused me and my family a lot of anxiety. I already wrote that my trust in the justice system and in people was zero, and has largely remained so to this day. During one of the last hearings on the case, one of the men told me that I didn't really have anything to worry about, because the documents were all valid and had been prepared really well. We had broken it all down for the New Zealanders anyway. I'll just jump ahead and say that one fine day, without warning and notice, the post van drove up and delivered almost 10 boxes full of files. I got everything back. The officials had written marginal notes on the invoices and inserted notes everywhere. Interesting reading at some points. but the documents were conclusive and the case was closed. Someone was disappointed. Whether it was Wolf or the New Zealanders, I can't tell. Until the house search, we all thought the matter was closed. Nobody suspected that the long and fat end was yet to come, and so I not only renovated the house but also set up a wood and metal workshop in the neighboring barn. I continued to work on my own triplane there and helped Marvin with his. The boy wanted to get it into the air at some point. However, the sword of Damocles of prison hovered over me, and so I told Marvin that I was unable to guarantee the safety of his plane here on site when I was no longer at home. I asked him to take the plane elsewhere until further notice. He was then able to make contact with the Kochs and their flying museum and store the plane there. One day he arrived with Brigitte Koch in the company and loaded everything onto a small truck. Unfortunately, I don't know what happened to the plane.
Und Action!
Du, wer braucht? Ja. Also ich würde nicht, dass zum ersten Mal machen, geht ganz gut. Ich brauche noch etwas Übung.
The upheaval and the whole Galama brought a lot with it. Because so much happened at the time, it is not easy to report all the details in a continuous story. The listener must understand that the story jumps back and forth from time to time. What happened to my Amaki, for example? What happened to my company? I'll unravel all that. At the end of this episode, I would like to talk briefly about my company. As you could hear from the last episodes, I worked for Peter Jackson as a freelancer and founded the company for this purpose under the name Engels Aeroplanbau. Of course, this company and I personally also had a tax consultant because I didn't want to have anything to do with all that stuff personally. I had clarified this with my Alexandra at the time. I said I would set up the company if you took care of all the written invoicing stuff and hired a tax consultant. That went well as part of this division of labor and later saved us the asses, because everything was transparent thanks to my dear Alexandra. I also told Alexandra at the time, listen, things are constantly changing and even this won't last forever. At some point it will come to an end. That's life. But I never thought it would happen so quickly and in such a way. When the drama started and we no longer received any money from New Zealand, everything was handled accordingly with a tax consultant. A small closing balance sheet was drawn up and all assets, materials, machines, etc. were listed and submitted to the tax office. There were no outstanding debts and so I deleted the company. I went to the tax office and deregistered from their association membership. The lady behind the desk had a strange expression on her face and called her boss because she hadn't heard anything like that before. I explained to the man that I didn't want to use money anymore from now on, that I had no income and therefore wouldn't be alleged to pay taxes. He accepted that and I haven't heard from them since. It really is like that. I personally turned my back on the monetary system as a result of this experience. I personally no longer touch money. I no longer have a bank account either. But that's not the point now. I want to talk about the dissolving of my company, Engels Aeroplanbau, because I know that rumors have been spread here that Engels was convicted of fraud and had to file for bankruptcy. Such nonsense. I've never been involved in insolvency proceedings, which would have been a highly legal procedure, because I've never had any financial debts or obligations to creditors anywhere. But I know that such reputation-damaging things have been spread. If I hadn't turned my back on the money system by my own accord and had continued to try to gain or keep a foothold within this weird system, I wouldn't have succeeded because these reputation-damaging lies that were spread would have put off any potential customer. I learned my lesson and built my life differently from then on, so I didn't really care about these slanderous statements because they couldn't affect me, and I knew they were lies. It even went so far that third parties told me that they had heard how the public prosecutor's office had seized not only my airplanes, but even the machines and tools and materials. It's crazy what rumors are circulating and being spread by self-proclaimed experts. None of that happened. I dissolved my company myself, paid all outstanding taxes, all materials and tools and machineries according to my inventory and balance sheets, lists and airplanes moved with me to Weschenbeuren because they belonged to me and were not seized. What stupid nonsense. And people believe such crap. But that's enough for this part. You can find out what happened to my Olga, or the MB308, and what happened to my other airplanes in the next episodes of Stories of an Aircraft Builder.